Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Employee to Boss podcast. I am your host, Hayleigh Hayhurst. Today I wanted to host a solo episode because it's been a minute since I've just jumped on here and just, talked about podcasting, about my business, about life, all of these things. And lately I've been feeling really moved to actually talk about confidence in podcasting and also confidence in starting a podcast for your business. So those can be two very different things, depending on how you want to use your podcast. If you want to use it as a marketing tool or as your whole business. I've talked about this in the past episodes, but really I wanted to talk about confidence today. So if you don't know me, my name is Hayleigh Hayhurst, and I am the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcasting agency specializing in editing, marketing, and strategy. When I started my podcast last November, I had been thinking about it for a while, and I've also had been in the podcast industry for 5 years so far. So back in college, if you don't know my story, back in college, I had a podcast with my best friend. And then when I moved up to Seattle, she continued doing that podcast. And I took a step away and started my podcast editing business and coaching and strategy business. And while it did take a lot of confidence for me to put my brand out there, Espresso Podcast Production, and actually start doing it, it felt a lot different than when I decided to actually start my podcast. So it sounds so counterintuitive, but for some reason, starting a business was very easy for me. I, got a referral, and that's how I got my first client. And then when it came to actually, growing my business, of course, there were growing pains. Of course, it was difficult at times, but overall, it was actually a really simple process looking back, and I'm so thankful that I did it. And honestly, I think the reason that it was easy was because I needed to make money. I was recently out of college, unemployed, and decided that I wanted to have my own business basically. And so I really didn't have a choice in the matter of, of course I could have went to corporate, of course I could have made other things work, but I really needed to make something work, and I really wanted to make my podcast editing and strategy business the thing that made me money. So, long story short, that's kind of why I think it was so easy for me. I was so confident in starting my business, and I was like, okay, this is going to happen. I'm going to do this. And so then I started my Instagram, started getting more and more clients, and honestly, Instagram was a little bit of a struggle for me in the beginning, just because similar to what we're about to talk about is, you're putting your face out there, you're putting your voice out there, and it's different than just sitting behind a brand logo. So Instagram, took me a couple weeks to get on board with, but then I decided what it would look like, what my branding would look like, what I'd be posting, if I showed my face, when I showed my face, all those type of things. And so I kept a lot of control over it while I grew my brand. And then last November, so about a year into having my own business, working on all these other podcasts, I decided to start my own podcast. And I know you may be thinking oh, why didn't you do this sooner? Why didn't you do that? I don't have an excuse. It's the same reason that my clients tell me that they haven't started their podcast yet. It's the same thing, oh, I've been thinking about it. Oh, I've been thinking about it. Oh, I'm not sure yet. It just doesn't feel right. All of those excuses that we tell them ourselves, I was definitely telling myself. And so I honestly think that's why I'm qualified to talk about this episode and talk about the confidence portion of podcasting, because I had to work through all of this myself. Even though I knew everything there is to know about podcast editing, marketing, all those type of things, I still struggled actually starting. So let's get into actually talking about the confidence part of podcasting and how you, as a business owner or as a entrepreneur or just as someone who wants to have a podcast, like what can you actually do to start doing it and really loving it when you do it confidently? So I'm going to go through about 3 steps here that you can, really work through. If it works for you to journal, definitely think about these topics. If it works for you just to speak it out, which whatever works for you, just think about these things and really start doing something towards this goal of podcasting. So, the first thing that I always say is your audience is going to come to you because they love you and what you have to say. So, it's not like they're going to listen to you because of the guests that you have. You might have some really cool guests, but they're going to come and listen to you because they like you. So you're building a brand and a community around yourself, which can be really intimidating to think about. Like, oh, I'm attracting all of these people to listen to me. What the heck? And it does sound scary, but here's the way that I think of it. Other people have voices, right? Every person has a voice, and it really depends on how we use it and how we promote it if people listen to us. So think about like all of these influencers out there who maybe are spreading messages that you agree with and the ones that are spreading messages that you don't agree with. People are listening to them. People are listening to what they're saying. They're, subconsciously putting it into their own thoughts. They may repeat it. They may look up to these people. And what I think about this is, why are you not one of those voices that they're listening to? Why are you letting other people maybe speak for you? If there's someone that you are listening to and you're like, oh, I really don't enjoy the way that they talk about this, or I really don't like the way that they do this or that. Okay, well, you don't need to listen to them, but you are anyway. And so the reason that a lot of people are held back from actually podcasting is because they are not used to actually sharing these ideas that they have, or sharing their voice and advice and speaking with people if they're hosting interviews or talking to themselves for 20, 30 minutes, an hour, however long it is. And so I really want you, the first step that I want you to do is really like solidify, what do you want to talk about and who's listening? Like, who's actually going to listen to you and all of those things. So to break that down, think about a couple of topics. If you're interested in so many different things, you can of course have an umbrella topic, right? So wellness can be an umbrella topic for diet, lifestyle, and maybe cooking, right? And so you could talk about all of those different things under your umbrella topic, but really think about what that topic is. When you have a vision for what you want your podcast to be about, you are automatically a lot more confident because it's going to be easier for you than someone who maybe has like 6 topics that they're interested in and try to go back and forth between them. Then you're not going to be seen as an expert in your own eyes or in the eyes of the audience, because they're like, oh, the last episode was about cooking tips and this one's about mindset around some other topic that's not related. Like, it just really takes away some credibility. And so when you know what you're talking about, then you're a lot more confident in it. The next one that I want you to do is talk to yourself. Okay, now I know I talk to myself all the time, or, I talk to my dog. I say I'm talking to my dog, not myself. But what I want you to do is actually sit down and just record yourself talking. You can do this in your memos app, on your phone, or you could sit down on Zoom. You can do video, you can do just audio, whatever it is, sit down and pretend like it's a podcast episode. If you're really nervous about podcasting, have a conversation with yourself. Try to make this 10 minutes long and see if you can do it. And just, if you can't, write yourself some notes. Say, okay, I want to touch on this topic and this topic. Let's make this a conversation with myself. Imagine that you're talking to other people. Imagine that you are talking to your audience, and that makes it a lot easier. Think of someone listening to you that's just absorbing what you're saying. And this episode that you're recording on whatever platform you're doing, no one else has to listen to it ever. This is just for your use. This is for you to realize you can do it. You can do podcasting. You can host episodes. You can host interviews. You can do whatever you set your mind to. Okay. But also you can do it. I shared a reel the other day on Instagram, and it was the sound that was like something about being nervous. And I was looking through the sound. It didn't have that many users, and I got about 10,000 views on this video. And it was just, I was talking about being nervous before podcast interviews. This is episode 41 for me, and I've hosted so many interview episodes, and there's still times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm scared. Like, this is going to be so fun, but what are we going to talk about? Blah, blah, blah. Like, all these thoughts that go through my head that are pretty typical for everyone. So just know other people get nervous too. Just the way that you present yourself needs to be confident. And that brings me to my third and final point about confidence in podcasting: how you present yourself. So if you are, very timid and have a tiny voice, like a very quiet voice, that is okay. But you have to think of it from the point of view of your listeners. So where are your listeners listening to you? Is it on their runs? Is it on their daily walks? Is it on the way to pick up their kids from school? The way that you present yourself is really important. For me, I have to have a good background. I have to have a full face of makeup. I have to look good for me to feel confident in presenting myself. And I record all of these videos on, I record it from video and then edit just the audio. But I like seeing the person I'm interviewing. I like seeing their face. That way we can have that special moment together as well as just talking, seeing each other's reactions, things like that. And so I need to be my best self to promote myself as a confident interviewer. And even on these solo episodes, I need to present myself as a confident person. I need to plan what I'm talking about ahead of time. I need to really psych myself up to be like, okay, let's do this. Let's share our knowledge. Let's make this great. Let's share this with the audience. And it's really, really fun for me because I am confident in this because I've been doing it for so long that I know what I'm going to talk about. I know who's listening. I know who I'm speaking to, and I know that I can help you as a listener. And so really go through a little routine maybe before you start recording. But honestly, it really just comes down to who do you want to be known as? What topics do you want to share? And, how do you want to be perceived? We can't all choose how we're perceived all of the time, but you can do the best that you can through preparing well, working on your voice. If you say all the time, or mine is always, and so if that makes you feel less confident, work on taking those out of your vocabulary, your speech outside of episodes too. If you say when you're talking to coworkers or you're talking to your clients or your friends, notice that and be like, okay, I can take this out here, and just start being aware of them. And this is really how you present yourself confidently. There's so many different things. Like next week, I'm talking about personal branding with a guest, and photography, and building your brand and your brand colors and all of these things. But really, it comes down to the core of you of what are you confident in talking about? Do you really want to talk about that topic, and what makes you an expert? You need to convince yourself that you're confident before you can convince others that you're confident. So those are my tips on really sharing a confident, fun podcast. I think podcasting is awesome, and the people I've met through podcasting is incredible. I am on episode 41, like I said, and one of my friends, she just hit episode 100. one of my clients also hit episode 100, and another one of my friends just hit a year on her podcast. So really just sticking through it. And, your first episode or two doesn't have to be perfect. It really, really doesn't. You just need to put something out there and present yourself as like, this is me. This is who I am. I am confident. I am sharing the voice of my brand. I am talking. I'm getting my ideas out there. I'm sharing advice, life knowledge, all of these things, and really convincing yourself that you're just a podcaster. That's really it. So if you have any questions for me, definitely let me know in my Instagram DMs. My Instagram is Espresso Podcast Production. I love these episodes, and I hope that you enjoyed this and that it was helpful for you in so many ways. I would love it if you could leave me a review with your thoughts, and definitely come connect with me. I think that a big part of podcasting is the community that I'm building. And so the more I hear from you guys, the more inspired I am to keep going and really creating content that you're definitely interested in learning about. So this has been such a joy, and I'm just so thankful to be in episode 41. Oh my gosh, I'm going to hit a year so soon now. I think 6 weeks. So very, very exciting, and it's been such a fun journey. So let's connect, and I'll catch you on the next interview episode. Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.